Yes, you're welcome to the My Environment is My Initiative one-day webinar to commemorate the 2024 World Environment Day, June 5. And we'll be talking about building a resilient future. And before I go ahead, I would like to introduce myself. And as you might have seen on the screen, my name is Hussein Orekoya. I'm a Mastercard Foundation scholar and also a master degree student studying development engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. And today I'll be sharing with us some notable strategies that have been implemented in Sub-Saharan Africa to restore our degraded land and also combat desertification and drought resilience in Africa. And most of these strategies and solutions have been in place since time immemorial, and it has been a way to make sure that we adapt well to the rapid climate change that is happening. And so I'll be going straight to the presentation by sharing with us about My Environment is My Initiative. My Environment is My Initiative is a non-profit organization that advocates for sustainable, natural, and built environment in Africa. And the organization leverages data and effective storytelling to impact local communities and influence global climate change policies in such a way that it brings about the climate change knowledge and expertise close to local communities that are the detriment of the effects of climate change. And over the years, we've been in collaboration with global organizations like the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Climate Education Coalition to amplify advocacy at the grassroots level in Nigeria and across Africa. And also, we are also part of the supporting organization for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And the decade is the decade we have now. So, which is from 2020 to 2030. Since the inception of My Environment My Initiative, memyAfrica is proud to have implemented over 15 social impact projects that have centered around climate change and environmental sustainability. And with this, MEMA has made a lot of impact amongst youth organizations and also youth in communities of up to 20,000 youths, and participated in 15 global conferences to add our voice to the global discussions around climate change mitigation and adaptation. So the session is recorded, and for those that will join us later, they will have access to these recordings. They can join or they can have access to this via all our social media platforms, and particularly we'll be uploading the full video of this session on our YouTube channel. So to go straight to the topic of today, I would like to set the stage by explaining and defining some key terminologies that we are familiar with and some that we are not too familiar with. So one of it is the climate change. What does climate change simply mean? For many of us, we might have heard about climate change even right from the news, media, and also maybe in our schools or within our friends, and seen a lot of people advocating for climate change. Climate change simply means the long-term alteration, the long-term change in temperature, precipitation, wind patterns, and every other atmospheric elements or atmospheric actions in terms of atmospheric, how do I put it now? Atmospheric conditions, atmospheric conditions that affect or that makes our climate system work very well for us. And some of these atmospheric conditions might be humidity, the rainfall, which is the precipitation, and the temperature. how are we getting the solar radiation into our Earth's surface. And the next one I'll be discussing about is drought. Drought is a common word that we hear amongst meteorologists, talking about the quantity of water that we have access to, and how does this really impact agriculture, water supply, and our natural and built environment ecosystem. And when a particular community or city have a long time period of low access to water, that is when we can ascribe that situation to be, or that particular community to be suffering from what is called drought. That is, they have little access to water. And the next one will be desertification. Many of us are aware of the term desert. Desert is an area that's full of dry sand. And desertification is a process whereby fertile land that we make use of, that we rely on for our food production, agriculture, are being degraded and turned into a desert, dry land area that could not support tree growth or cropland. So how has this now come to play? Climate change has been a kind of an effect that is accelerating the rate of desertification globally. And Africa, particularly the Sub-Saharan Africa region, is at the detriment of high rates of desertification, which means that the rate at which our cropland and our land become turned from a fertile land into a desert is in an alarming rate. And the next one I'll be talking about is the climate resilience. Climate resilience really talks about how do we prepare, how do we improve the capacity of communities and our natural ecosystem to withstand the shocks and stresses from climate change impact. We talk about climate change hazards like flooding, droughts, and even desertification. These are climate hazards that we need to build resilience around. And how do we build resilience to ensure that our communities and our system have the capacity to withstand and to respond to the impact and effect of climate change in our daily livelihood. But we're diving straight to the strategies now, and I think this is where the gist aspect is for this presentation, because I have been able to lay the foundation with the key terminologies in the topic, which are land restoration, combating desertification, and also drought resilience itself. So, and what does this really mean for Sub-Saharan Africa? How are we adapting to the impact of climate change, and how are we building resilience to all of the climate hazards? First of it is agroforestry. Agroforestry is one of the drought resilience strategies of choice globally and regionally in Africa. And agroforestry simply means about integrating trees with crops and livestock. Considering a piece of land that have a farmland that has tree planting as well, and also livestock, in such a way that resources, the nutrients from both sides, either from the trees and from the crops, are being used for the livestock, and also resources and nutrients from the livestock are also being used for agriculture. So with this, agroforestry has shown to be one of the best ways to improve soil fertility, increase biodiversity, and also enhance crop yield. You will agree with me from the definition of desertification, where fertile land turns to a desert. With agroforestry, we can improve soil fertility. So this is one of the strategies that have been implemented by farmers in Sub-Saharan Africa to improve water retention and also reduce soil erosion. And this is an example I would like to cite about the haba tree in Malawi. Actually, forgive me for the pronunciation of this tree. I'm not a biologist, so I try to find a way to call it very well. But this is one of the practices in Malawi that they plant this particular tree species with crop seeds like maize, beans, and millets. And the tree itself helps to improve soil fertility and increase the maize yield without additional fertilizers. And if you follow the trend around climate change and agriculture, one of the practices that we are dealing with now is the reliance on inorganic fertilizers. Inorganic fertilizers are fertilizers that are produced with chemicals, and chemicals add a lot of detriments to our soil. And with the practice of agroforestry, we could improve our soil fertility without relying or let's say pouring of chemicals into our soil. And one other, okay, let me put it this way again. Agroforestry has several types. And the first type that we have here is the alley cropping system. Alley cropping system is the one you can find underneath here where you have this woman. These are trees that have been planted. These are the crops, and these are other tree at the other side. It's an alley that's been planted, and the trees serve a lot of purposes. And one of it is providing shade for the crops in such a way that it reduces, or let's say, it even stops the dependence on building a greenhouse for a low economic agricultural farm owner. And we're talking about Africa here. Africa is a developing economy. We do not have the economic capacity to provide greenhouse farm for smallholder farmers. So using agroforestry method helps to improve their economic livelihood in terms of planting crops that yields faster and adapt to climate change. The next one I'm talking about is the soil and water conservation techniques. This technique talks about, and this is an ancient technique. It has been used quite around like for ages. And this has been a tested and trusted method that farmers have been using to improve their farm produce and the like. So this technique talks about contour bonding, tracing, and also terracing, and also the construction of zia pits. Zia pits is a very much how do I put it? Very much known practice in Sub-Saharan Africa. We rely on this to plant our crops. In one of the pits, you have mulch. Mulch is a form of soil stabilizer. We use mulch to stabilize the soil and also retain water when there's rainfall. And mostly in Africa, we rely more on rain-fed agriculture. So having pits like this, whenever there's rainfall or even little amount of water in the community to plant their crops, it is enough for them to use, because such water will not be drained away by erosion. So, and an example we have here is in Burkina Faso, where farmers utilizes the zia pits to rehabilitate degraded land. You can see in the image we have here, where this is, I guess this is cucumber produce, whereby they can plant enough crops and make use of them for their agricultural produce. And as a result, it increased crop production and also stabilize the soil in drought-prone areas. The next strategy that we're sharing about is the sustainable land management. How do we sustainably manage our land when we understand that climate change is really impacting our land in terms of high temperature, the rate of dryness, the rate of evapotranspiration happening in the world is really alarming. And with that, we have the SLM practice, which includes crop rotation, cover cropping, and also conservation tillage. So this is mainly for agriculture. And why we are focusing on agriculture here is because of the topic. It talks about land restoration. How do we restore our land for agriculture? And with this, practicing sustainable soil land management helps to maintain the soil health, and also the fertility of the soil. And one example of this is being practiced in Ethiopia, where they practice the use of SLM in the Engr region, and it helps to improve the vegetation and crop cover. Looking at the image we have here, these crop waste are being brought back to the farmland to serve as nutrient absorber, water retainer. And with this, it will provide enough water for the roots of the crops. And that way, makes the soil become more softer and more resilient to drought. And in case of high temperature, there will be a reduced rate of evapotranspiration and dryness in the soil. And the next one would be the reforestation and afforestation. And this is a common practice to us that we are aware about. So we are aware of planting of trees and the benefit of trees in our ecosystem and within our cities and rural communities. Planting trees has helped to combat desertification. And more of this is happening in such a way that it helps to stabilize soil and improve water cycle, and also provide habitat for biodiversity. Because where there are trees, a lot of animals will come there. A lot of animals, either vertebrate or invertebrate animals, either mammals or reptiles, they come around, they have their own habitat where they could live, grow, and produce in such a way, which is also a benefit to the agricultural ecosystem too. So in that way, reducing the cutting down of trees, that's deforestation, helps to improve crop yield and also mitigate climate change impact. An example of reforestation and afforestation programs in Sub-Saharan Africa is the Great Green Work Project. The Great Green Work Project has been ongoing for more than a decade now. If I could remember, the Great Green Work started in 2007. And over the years, they have been able to work toward the goal of achieving and restoring over 100 million hectares of land, starting across the Sub-Saharan region of Africa, from Senegal to Djibouti. These are one of the strategies in Africa for restoring the land and also becoming drought resilient. And the next strategies I'll be sharing about is water harvesting and management. Water harvesting and management, we talk about strategies for us to manage and conserve water for use in time of drought. In such a way that when there is rainfall, and this also impacts both the agricultural ecosystem and also the residential, or let's say the city ecosystem as well. Imagining from this image we have here, and also that captures the water they have and store it for the time of use, and also reduce the burden of using fresh water for all the activities. You could make use of harvested water for either gardening, you can use it for toilet flushing, and also car washing and the likes. And this could also be practiced in the agriculture ecosystem as well, whereby harvested water from rainfall, because we've agreed and we understand that Africa relies majorly on rain-fed agriculture. And how do we manage the scarce water resources that we have? So having a way to store water and reuse it during the time of drought to continue the production of food in our community. That's one of the strategies that have been in place in Sub-Saharan Africa to adapt to the impact of climate change and also drought. So we have a lot of examples, but one of it is in Kenya, which is an arid region in Africa, in East Africa, to be precise. They make use of community-based water harvesting projects that makes it easy for agricultural productivity and also enhancing drought resilience. Because one thing again is that when you look at the agricultural sector very well, I love agriculture because it's firstly is the industry that employs the largest number of people in Africa. And also agriculture relies more on natural resources. And these natural resources are at the detriment of being endangered by climate change, because climate change is making it become scarce. And with this, we will discuss scarcity in the resources. It leads to a lot of imbalances in terms of conflicts, banditry, and the likes. And with water harvesting management practice, whereby you could manage the water you have very well, it will help you to make use of the water whenever you need it again. So, and that's the strategy I shared about. The next one is the drought resistant crop variety. So drought resistant crop varieties talks about having most of the crops that we know of, like maize crop, millets, and technically design the crop to have high level of resistance to drought. And this is different from GMOs, genetically modified crops. So with this, we have crops that have been developed and promoted in such a way that they are resistant to drought, and they even rely more on less amount of water to withstand any of the climate change hazard. And for example, we have the ICRISAT. ICRISAT is a research institute that works to develop drought-tolerant varieties of crops, such as millets, sorghum, and maize in Sub-Saharan Africa. With this, they've been able to see how trees could, or let's say how crops, or let's say how to continue planting our crops to feed the growing population in Africa, in such a way that we don't rely on crops that need a large amount of water for it to germinate and produce food for us. So these are the strategies that I've identified. There are countless of them, and there are a lot of strategies to adapt to climate change and restore our land. And I think here is the last part of the presentation. And I'm so much glad to have shared the experience around 6 key drought resilience strategies in Sub-Saharan Africa and how we could scale them up. And these strategies have been applied, maybe, how do I put it now? Like, they've been applied in silo, let me put it that way, because mostly we need to apply them in a large scale. For instance, we have large number of smallholder farmers in Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa to be precise. And the practice of sustainable agriculture and drought resilience agriculture is being practiced in a very minimal way, because it's rely more on effective policy making and also funding opportunities for smallholder farmers. So to see these strategies becoming amplified and becoming well, or let's say globally acceptable, it is reliant more on community-based use, and also community acceptance and understanding of how to practice these strategies. So I think this brings us to the end of the presentation, and thank you for your attention. The end of the presentation, and though we have a less amount of attendance, and we've made sure that we have this session recorded for those that will be joining us later on our social media platform, you could have access to this recording on our YouTube channel at My Environment is My Initiative, where you understand more, share your comments, and also add your experience you have in agriculture, and also how you have personally been adapting to the impact of climate change in your community. So I leave the floor open to those of us that are here online. I could see around 5 people here, including myself. So if you have a comment to make, and also particularly question to ask about the strategies that I've shared earlier, you could signify by either raising your hand or unmuting yourself and speak. Thank you very much. So we have a few minutes to round up the session.
Yes, hi, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
So, thank you for sharing. I think more of what you talked about is kind of self-explanatory, and it's something we actually need at this point in time in the Sub-Saharan Africa. So I think sharing it to the wider audience is actually a good way to go. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, and that's more of the reason why we are doing this, to bring the awareness closer to people, because most of these strategies have been used in Africa hundreds of years back, roughly maybe around 100 years. And most of the time, at this age and time that we clamor for innovation. So not knowing that the already existing innovations are there, only waiting for scaling. When we scale up these nature-based solutions, I believe we will have more robust way of adapting well to climate change. So, and that's more of the reason why we're doing this, and we're so grateful for the opportunity to have an experienced speaker like this to talk about this topic. And I'm also equally happy about the attendance and those that will be having access to this recording at their own convenient time. So I think if there are any other contribution, I would like to have that before we end this session. I think we still have 3 more people that could say something. So I think we can have a roundup on the presentation, and I think I'll just quickly make a summary of what has been discussed. Firstly, I introduced the organization, and I about the fund of MEMI and why we are doing what we're doing. And our mission is to amplify and create a lot of awareness around environmental sustainability of the natural and built environments in Africa. And I went ahead to explain key natural and key climate hazards that we could find on the topic, talking about desertification, droughts, reforestation, and climate resilience, and how all of these terms work together for us to understand how to adapt to it and even differentiate one from the other. For example, climate change and weather. They are 2 different things, but they are closely related. Climate change pattern is being monitored and being assessed over a long period of time, while weather is being assessed per time, like time stamp, in such a way that weather can change within counters of time in a day. So going forward, we'll not talk about the strategies that have been used for land restoration and drought resilience. First of it we talk about is agroforestry. Agroforestry is the integration of trees, crops, and livestock together in a very much complementary manner that resources and nutrients from one side of the system is being utilized in the other side of the system. So that's in a nature-based way, without the use of chemicals and relying on artificial resources. So we talk about soil and water conservation techniques in our farmlands. This is one of the techniques, and we also talk about land management practices in such a way that we utilize used crops, or let's say waste crop products, back into the soil as nutrients that retain water and make the soil more resilient to climate change. Further, we discuss about reforestation and afforestation, mentioning the Great River Project, the water harvesting and management, and also drought-resistant crop varieties, in order that we develop and also promote the use of long-term drought-resistant crop that could withstand or that could flourish well in a low water resource area. And that brings us to the final part of the presentation. And thank you all for your attention and your contribution. Have a great day and happy World Environment Day. And let's continue using our platforms, social media, and even within our community on site in terms of family, friends. Let's keep talking about climate change and how it really impacts us and how we can adapt very well to climate change. Thank you very much for your time and have a nice and blessed day. Bye-bye.